It's August 26, 1980. You're playing roulette at a casino in some shithole town in Nevada, and you've been losing all night. You think about giving up and going home, but then you remember that 90% of all gambling addicts quit right before they hit it big. So you put down your last $300 on red. You don't know what it is, but you have this feeling in your gut. You just know that red is gonna hit. You put down your cash and the dealer screams, "No more bets." And the wheel starts spinning. The adrenaline is coursing through your body so hard you think you might pass out. As the wheel slows down, your heart beats faster and faster. Then, after what seems like an eternity of spinning, the ball finally stops. And it's black. Now you're mad. You're mad at yourself, you're mad at the world, but most of all, you're mad at this stupid casino. You wish somebody would just blow this whole place up. Meanwhile, two delivery drivers pull up to the back of the casino carrying a huge metal device. As soon as they drop it off inside, they sprint out of the building like the thing was gonna explode or something. There was something off about this thing. When a security guard went to check it out, he noticed there was a note on top of it. It read, "This is a bomb. I repeat, do not try to move or disarm this bomb. It will explode. It contains enough TNT to severely damage the entire block." Whoa, this wasn't good. The security guard wasn't getting paid nearly enough to deal with this tomfoolery, so he called the bomb squad immediately. But they were stumped. This was unlike any other bomb they've ever seen. It was more complicated than a white girl's Starbucks order. Experts from all over the world tried to defuse it with no luck. And then the bomb exploded and destroyed the casino. This is the story of the Harvey's Hotel bomb heist. A story so insane, I'm surprised it hasn't been made into an unnecessarily long Netflix documentary. Our story begins in State Line, Nevada. Nevada? You probably never heard of this town. It's like Vegas, but shittier. Wait, no, it's like Reno, but shittier. The only reason this town even exists is because people in Lake Tahoe, California wanted to gamble, but they didn't want to drive all the way down to Vegas. Hence the name State Line, because it's located on the state line of Nevada and California. There are four main casinos in this town, including Harvey's Hotel Resort and Casino, which was started by a guy named Harvey Gross. Harvey wasn't your typical scumbag casino owner. He was a butcher from Sacramento who, after years of hard work, scraped together enough cash to open up his own little business. In 1944, Gross and his wife opened up Harvey's Wagon Wheel Saloon and Gambling Hall, a single-room casino with 3 slot machines and 2 blackjack tables. Right from the start, business was booming. The Wagon Wheel became the most popular casino in the Lake Tahoe area, because it was the only casino in the Lake Tahoe area. By the 1950s, the Wagon Wheel had grown into an 11-story, 197-room hotel with more degenerates, prostitutes, and gambling addicts than a Super Smash Bros. Convention. Things weren't going too bad for old Harvey Gross. But all of that would change on August 26, 1980. At 5:30 a.m., 2 men dressed as delivery drivers pulled up to Harvey's and dropped off a large metal contraption. They dropped it off on the 2nd floor and quickly left the building. Now, we would later find out that the delivery guys themselves didn't even know what they were carrying, but they were assured by their boss it was no big deal. Yeah, that was a fucking lie. For a while, nobody paid attention to the thing. Most people just assumed it was one of them fancy IBM computers. But eventually, a security guard went to check it out and noticed there was a note sitting on top of it. So he leaned up against the device and started reading. "Stern warning to the management and bomb squad. Do not move or tilt this bomb, because the mechanism controlling the detonators will set off at the slightest movement. This bomb is so sensitive that the slightest movement, either inside or outside, will cause it to explode." At that point, I'm pretty sure he stopped leaning on the thing, and he continued reading. "This bomb can never be dismantled or disarmed without causing an explosion, not even by the creator. Only by proper instruction can it be moved to a safe place where it can be deliberately exploded. If exploded, this bomb contains enough TNT to severely damage Harrah's across the street. This should give you some idea of the amount of TNT contained within this box. It is full of TNT. It is our advice to cordon off a minimum of 1,200 feet radius to remove all people from that area." And then there was also a list of demands. "We demand $3 million in used $100 bills. They must be unmarked, unbugged, and chemically untreated. If we find anything wrong with the money, we will stop all instructions for moving the bomb." After reading the note, the security guard was starting to think that this thing might be a bomb. So we called the bomb squad, who confirmed that it was indeed a bomb. And just like the note said, this was no ordinary bomb. This was the most complex, intricate bomb they had ever seen. They couldn't even attempt to disarm it because one wrong move and boom! It was all over. This was some real diehard shit. And the State Line Police Department was in over their heads. They had dealt with bomb threats before, but those were usually just drunk casino patrons who took a massive shit in the bathroom. This was serious, so they had to get the FBI involved. When the FBI got there, they noticed that the note also contained a set of detailed instructions for a ransom delivery, and they figured their best bet at catching whoever was behind all this was to actually go deliver the money, and then they'll figure it out from there. The ransomer said that the money should be delivered by helicopter. The pilot would land at the Lake Tahoe airport, where he would receive further instructions via a nearby payphone. They would then be given the drop-off location, which would be in the middle of the forest somewhere. Somebody would be waiting on the ground with a strobe light so the pilot would know exactly where to land. And then the exchange would be made. If the money was received without any problems, 6 sets of instructions regarding the removal of the bomb would be given at different times. The plan seemed pretty foolproof. The only problem was the FBI didn't have that much money just lying around. And for some reason, Harvey was being a cheap bastard and refused to fork over any cash. So they had to settle for this old trick where they mixed in real money with newspaper to make it look like they had more than they actually had. But they had to be careful because the person they were dealing with was clearly a diabolical genius. So at 12 p.m. that night, it was time. The helicopter pilot flew to the airport. Once he was there, he got a call at the payphone and was given a set of coordinates, just like the note said. It was some shit straight out of an action movie. The pilot flew to the spot, but there was no strobe lights, so he started flying around the area for hours looking for the strobe lights until his helicopter ran out of gas and he was forced to head back to the airport. It turns out the schmuck on the phone gave the pilot the wrong location. Okay, maybe these guys weren't as smart as we originally thought. This was a major setback, not only for the criminals, but also for the FBI. Now, the only option they had was to try and disarm the bomb themselves. Oh, one thing I should mention is that whoever wrote the note really did not want the media to know about this whole situation. It said, all news media, local or nationwide, will be kept ignorant of the transactions between us and the casino management until the bomb has been removed from the building. Well, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But what happens in State Line, Nevada is national news. The morning after the failed ransom, news teams were swarming Harvey's. Somebody leaked what was going on to the press, but I mean, what did they expect? The entire building was evacuated, and it was crawling with feds 24/7. It was only a matter of time before somebody figured it out. It was honestly kind of a ridiculous request. Now, despite the fact that there was a literal weapon of mass destruction ready to blow up at any minute, everybody in State Line was having a good-ass time. People were coming from all over the country to witness the chaos for themselves. Some people were even selling t-shirts that said, "I got bombed at Harvey's." And the other casinos in the area were taking bets on when Harvey's was gonna blow up. In short, people were loving it. Well, except for the bomb squad, because they still had no idea what the hell they were gonna do. They had been throwing ideas back and forth for hours with no luck. They couldn't move the bomb to a safer place or put anything inside of it without a high risk of setting it off. Fortunately, the media circus did bring one good thing, and that was a smart person. A civilian named Leonard Wolfson came up with the genius idea to use another bomb. Okay, it might sound stupid, but Mr. Wolfson was well respected in his field. He was like a explosives expert or something, and he consulted with the Navy. So he knew what he was talking about. I'll try to simplify this as much as possible, but basically the bomb had a brain and all the fuses were connected to his brain. So if they used a smaller bomb to blow up the brain, then it would sever the connection to the fuses, thus rendering it safe. Okay, so maybe it still sounds like a stupid plan, but hey, nobody else had any ideas, so they decided to go through with it. The bomb squad fully evacuated themselves, except one person had to go in to place the charge. So they drew straws to see which schlemiel was going to be stuck going in. It was Steve. Steve was in a tough spot. He had to place the charge in the exact right place, down to the millimeter. For this plan to work, he had... I know this looks bad, but surprisingly everybody was okay. Steve made it out fine. They detonated the charge from a remote spot. But the casino was fucked. The bomb had blown a 60-foot wide hole in the building that went from the basement all the way to the 5th floor. If the people who made this building worked on the World Trade Center, 9/11 would have never happened, okay? It's like a miracle this building was still standing. But it was looking like Harvey's checkbook was about to take a lot of damage as well. Luckily, his insurance covered most of the damages. All the other casinos opened their doors right back up after the explosion, and pretty much everything was the same, except now the guests had this lovely view of the rubble across the street. And the people who predicted the timing were a little bit richer. But the insanity was far from over. While the feds were standing around in the rubble, a call came in from the ransomers. They wanted to set up another money drop. Apparently, the Schlemiels didn't realize the bomb already went off. Man, what a shit show. This whole fiasco was really bad PR for the FBI, and they were pissed that they got outsmarted by these schmucks. So they were working overtime to catch whoever was responsible, and they had a pretty good idea of who it might be. The number one suspect was Harvey Gross. Wait, hold on a second. Why would this man blow up his own hotel? That doesn't make any sense. Well, the FBI discovered that not too long before the incident, Harvey had approached the Nevada Gaming Commission asking for a permit to expand his casino. You see, Harvey was having a hard time competing with the newer, nicer casinos in the area. Nobody wanted to go to his shitty old joint when there were more modern options available. But after taking Harvey's request into careful consideration, the commission told him to fuck off. Funnily enough though, a week after the bombing, the commission approved Harvey's expansion. And even better, he could fund it with that sweet insurance payout he was about to get. Who would have thought that all it took to get the commission on his side was a little act of domestic terrorism? So with all that in mind, Harvey was starting to look like the perfect suspect. The FBI subpoenaed him, searched his home, interrogated him for hours, and even made him take a polygraph test. But the guy was clean. He was probably the only casino owner in the world that wasn't a criminal. So now it was back to square one. The FBI had to keep digging, and they couldn't afford to waste time because who knew if these mother suckers were planning to plant another bomb? The investigators didn't have much to go off, but what they did know was that they weren't dealing with some regular criminal scum. Whoever was behind this plot had money, resources, and time. After all, not just anybody could get their hands on 1,000 pounds of dynamite. Over the next few weeks, the FBI would interview over 500 suspects who fit their profile, and they even put out a $200,000 reward, which was like $1 billion in today's currency. Despite all of that, their leads were caca. The reward money was actually hurting them more than it was helping, because all sorts of people were calling in, making ridiculous claims to try to cash in. But after weeks and weeks of sifting through dog shit, the feds finally had a solid lead. They received a tip from the owner of the Balajo Motel, which was just a few miles down the road from Harvey's. He said 2 men driving a white Dodge van checked in the night before the bomb was delivered, and they matched the description of the delivery drivers. It wasn't much, but it was something. So they ran the plates and got a name: John Waldo Burgess Sr. And the more they looked into this guy, the more he made sense. John Burgess was born János Birges in Hungary. In World War II, he flew for the Luftwaffe, aka the Nazi Air Force, and single-handedly shot down 13 Allied planes. When the Soviet Union took over Hungary after the war, János was arrested by the Communist secret police for espionage and sent to a gulag in Siberia.
Welcome to the gulag.
After 8 years of hard labor, he was finally released. And as you can imagine, after almost a decade of being stuck in a prison camp surrounded by nothing but other dudes, our boy John was ready for some good old-fashioned coitus. So he stole some guy's wife. Seriously, he met a woman named Elizabeth at a bar, and she divorced her husband and married John 2 weeks later. What can I say? The man had riz. In 1956, the Soviets invaded Hungary again, so John and Liz decided to flee the country and move to the United States. Fast forward to 1972, John was now a millionaire. He had one of the most successful landscaping companies in California. He owned a winery, a restaurant, a private plane, and multiple monkey NFTs. He was so rich he didn't even know what to do with all his fat stacks. So he took up a hobby of being a degenerate gambler. And one of his favorite spots was good old Harvey's Hotel, Resort, and Casino. Big John spent so much time around there that he became a high roller. The staff treated him like royalty. He even became friends with Harvey himself. Honestly, he seemed like the type of guy who would try to extort a casino out of $3 million by planting a bomb in it, but the FBI didn't have anything concrete on Burgess. Yes, it's true that his van was near the hotel the night before the bombing, but that could have just been a coincidence. So they went to his house and questioned him about the van, but he said he had given it to his son John Jr. and that they should go talk to him instead. So they did, and when they arrived at Johnny's house, the van was nowhere to be found. Turns out, little Johnny Jr. conveniently sold it right after the failed ransom. When the agents questioned him, his lips were sealed tighter than a bull's ass in a rainstorm. But they weren't sealed tight enough. because apparently little JJ had been bragging to his girlfriend all about him and his daddy were gonna plant a bomb in a casino. After the two of them broke up, she told her new boyfriend, and when he saw that sweet, sweet reward money, he just had to call the police and tell them the whole story. I mean, it would be fiscally irresponsible not to at that point. So he told them everything. Basically, John Burgess was a putz. He drank a lot and frequently beat the shit out of his wife and kids. One day, his wife couldn't take the abuse anymore, and she took her own life. Allegedly, okay, because it's been speculated that John himself actually whacked her, because the circumstances of her death were kind of sus. Either way, after the death of his wife, Big John started spiraling out of control. He was already a big gambler, but it went from habit to addiction. He sold his landscaping business, retired, and pretty soon he was spending most of his time at the blackjack table. Within a few months, he was flat broke, but he came up with a brilliant idea of burning down his own restaurant and collecting the insurance money, of which he pocketed $300,000, which he lost like almost instantly. When he was completely out of money, he started borrowing cash from Harvey, and this put a strain on their relationship. One day, he came into the hotel with his girlfriend at the time and asked to be put up in his usual high roller suite, but Harvey turned him away, and John had to stay at a shitty motel room with his girlfriend, who thought he was the biggest schmuck on the planet. So John was sitting there in a roach-infested motel room, broke and humiliated. He had nothing left to lose. That's when he came up with his scheme to get revenge against Harvey and get his life back together. But he couldn't do it alone, so he enlisted the help of his two sons. It took some convincing, but the boys finally agreed to help, and the three of them drove over to a construction site Big John used to work with back in his landscaping days, and they stole 1,000 pounds of dynamite. And that was pretty much all she knew, but this is why you should never tell women anything, okay? It reminds me of those Drake lyrics.
If you pillow talking with the women that are screwing you, just know that she gon' tell another nigga when she through with you.
Wise words. After the tip, the Bureau were convinced that John Burgess and his two sons were behind the heist, but they needed something more solid if the charges were gonna stick. So they started watching the Burgesses 24/7. The three of them couldn't take a shit without the FBI knowing how it smelled. But after 2 weeks of 24-hour surveillance, they still didn't have the conclusive proof that they needed. The feds were getting desperate, so they decided to go for a Hail Mary. They arrested John Jr. and Jimmy Burgess and took them in for questioning. The two brothers sat in separate rooms being interrogated for hours, but they weren't giving up anything. The boys stuck to their story. At least for a while. See, after about 3 hours, the FBI realized that they weren't getting anywhere, so they decided to employ the classic interrogation tactic of lying. One of the officers convinced Johnny that his dear old dad threw him under the bus and ratted on his sons. Now, John Jr. knew that they were probably lying, but it wasn't worth the risk. He wasn't about to go to jail for his old man. After all, the guy was a scumbag. They didn't know him anything. So after talking it over, the two sons decided to kill their dad. Well, figuratively. They told the cops everything. How Big John was desperate for money, how he approached them with his scheme, how he got his hands on the dynamite, how they screwed up the ransom, everything. The funny thing is, if they would have just kept their mouths shut and asked for a lawyer, everybody would have gotten off scot-free. Remember, kids, if you're ever detained, the only word that should come out of your mouth is lawyer. The trial began soon after. John Sr. was doomed from the very start. Not only did his two sons testify against him, but for some reason, he decided to represent himself, which is never a good idea. On October 22nd, 1982, John Sr. was convicted on charges of federal extortion and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His two sons served no jail time in exchange for them testifying against their old man. Years later, John Jr. would write a memoir about this whole thing, and in it, he alleged that Harvey actually knew about John's plan ahead of time.